Welcome to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.
Hello and welcome to the Landwards podcast. I am joined today by a recent agriculture graduate, Maisie Wildgoose, who is going to tell us a little bit about her career and her plans. Hello, Maisie.
Hi there.
Thank you very much for joining us. Do you want to start from the beginning and tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay, absolutely. I come from a non-agricultural background. I always start with that. Both my parents are creatives. They've had nothing really to do with agriculture at all. When I grew up, we had nothing to do with farming. I didn't have any friends that farmed. I wasn't aware of any farming locally. Pretty naive to it all. I'd gone through school. I went through A-levels, had no intention of doing anything agricultural, had a vague interest in biology, but that was pretty much it. My main interest was sports science. I was a rower growing up, so I liked the sports science avenue. I thought it was interesting and kind of wanted a degree in that, but got fairly swayed by, first of all, the commitment to university. Second of all, I was a bit worried about coming out of university with a degree that I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to do for a while, or that I wasn't sure, what jobs were available. And then also when you look at the employment rates for those kind of courses, they're fairly low. And lots of the universities I was looking at, it made me nervous. And I thought I didn't want to invest in the money if I wasn't quite sure I was going to come out with, first of all, a job at all, and second of all, a relevant job even. So I still was a bit confused when I finished my A-levels. My next choice was to travel. So I ended up going to stay with my uncle in California for about 3 months. And I just helped him with his businesses. He had an avocado farm, but I didn't really get too involved in it. I did offer to pick avocados, but he said that there were quite a few animals in there that would do me some damage. So I avoided that. I did some water bill analysis, and that was my involvement in the farm, pretty much. I did a bit of traveling while I was there and quite enjoyed that. So I decided that I was going to carry on traveling instead of going home, and wound up in Australia. I was initially going to be New Zealand, but the visa was about double. So I went for the cheaper option. And with the threat of the snakes and the spiders, I took the warmth. My time in Australia, I started in Sydney, and then I did a couple of weeks working for those farms where you work for free but get paid in food and accommodation, that sort of thing. And then I decided I should probably get a proper job. I decided to look around Brisbane and found a pub job that was local. I'd grown up working in pubs, felt fairly confident doing that, and I got the bus from Brisbane to where I was going. And as I got on the bus, I said to the bus driver, it didn't have anything on the ticket to say how long the journey would be or anything. So I said, how far is it? And he said 17 and a half hours. I thought it was going to be about 4, but we went outback. It was really rural. So I turned up at this pub, and it was full at about 11 o'clock in the morning immediately. And I got in and I was thinking, what am I doing? It's desert. There's nobody in the village. It was a very small town. There was a pub and a post office, and that was it. Plus a few houses, but it was completely different from anything I'd ever known. And so I worked there. Really, I loved working the pub, but my landlady, the owner of the pub, she owned a farm as well. So a cattle station out, not a massive one, but a fair size one, out kind of down one of the local roads. And I'd gone to work for her a few times, and I absolutely loved it. So I just carried on picking up more farm experience, doing more for different people, ended up working for her grandparents on their station, or if anyone local needed any help on any to do with any cattle jobs, I was out there, or sheep jobs, I was always out there. So really enjoyed it. And then kind of when my time came up there, I was looking for farm jobs and ended up down in South Australia doing sheep and beef down there. Really enjoyed that too. And then it kind of came to the end of that one, and I thought, what am I going to do next? So I phoned up a friend and I said, do you know anyone looking for people to work? And she said, yes, my dad's got a friend looking for someone to help with cotton season. She goes, can you drive a tractor? And I was like, no. She's like, have you ever been in a tractor? I was like, no. And she goes, can you learn? And I said, probably. So ended up going there, and we did a cotton season from the bottom of New South Wales to the top of New South Wales. And I drove a tractor with a bale handler on the back. So I basically just moved bales all day, every day for 18 hours. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite fun. It was hard. I mean, my weekly hours were somewhere between 100 120 kind of most weeks. So it was a fair effort, a learning experience. I learned a lot about myself, and a fair bit about tractors. So then I came back home, and I thought I really liked agriculture, and found a dairy farm, and they said I could work with calves. I was excited about that. And it was more of a yardy job, so it was kind of a bit of everything. And so I did a few milkings a week, and I did all the yard work in the morning, drove a few tractors, and did some of the calf stuff. And it kind of got a few weeks in, and I was thinking, where do I go? What is next? I enjoy the job. I like working with cows. I didn't love the British summer, and I didn't love being cold and wet and covered in poo all the time, but I could handle it.
Maybe didn't see yourself as the finished article at this point either, presumably.
No, I wasn't. It wasn't a career, and I knew that I was almost too driven to not have a progression path laid out in front of me. That was kind of my big worry, that I didn't have that. So I had to think about it, and I was struggling with where I was at, because in lots of ways I wasn't experienced enough to be good at the job or great at the job, and I wasn't. But I almost thought that I had more to give to the industry than doing the same thing day in, day out for the next 40, 50, 60 years, whatever it was. So it got me kind of thinking, and I was looking at jobs that I thought were interesting, and I was scouring the internet through all the job sites, looking for not next jobs, but jobs in like 10, 15 years time, where I wanted to be, kind of what I was looking at. And really what was out there, because I had no idea of the industry in the UK. I had no idea of the breadth of it. So it was really good for me to kind of do that and look through what I wanted. And I noticed on all of them, pretty much all of the jobs that I wanted said you need a degree. And I thought, not this degree stuff again. I've been through this. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to. It's too much money. It's too much commitment. It's too specific. And then I spoke to a man who really he changed. Well, I suppose he changed my entire life. Really, he in my house, he's colloquially known as Mr. Man, because he helps me with all the important decisions. And I'd gone to speak to him, and I said, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really know where I'm going, and I don't know how to get to the place I want to be at, wherever that is. And he said, well, have you considered a degree in agriculture? And I thought, well, I don't really know what that is. And he goes, well, it's broad, it covers the entire of it. So what you know now you'll build on, and what you don't know you're going to learn about. And he goes, it gives you like a really good insight into the industry. And he goes, you can do it with animal science if you want to, or you can like go down specialization routes. And I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And he was saying, we talked about kind of what I was looking for and what suited me as a person. And he said, well, have you thought about Harper? And I said, bearing in mind that I didn't know what an agriculture degree was at the beginning of this conversation, I have no idea of any of them. And he goes, I think that you'd fit in well at Harper. So I took that, I looked at the website, and I thought, do you know what, it does look good. The course looks good. I saw that it had agriculture with animal science, and I thought that sounds interesting. I could probably do that. So I called up the admissions office. This was probably mid-August. I called them up and I said, I'm looking at applying next year. What do you need from me? And they said, well, what do you have? So I said, I've got my A levels. I've got these years of experience in Australia. I've done, 10 weeks on this dairy farm, all of this stuff. And they said, well, why don't you just come this year? And I thought, because it's about 3 weeks away. And they said, well, we are going through clearing at the moment. So if you want, we'll schedule in for an interview tomorrow and see kind of how that comes back. And I thought, well, it's a bit early. And to be honest, I was unconvinced. I thought, I'm not ready for the commitment yet. But I had my interview, and it got to the end of the interview, and the module leader, or the course leader, in fact, he was doing my interview. I was so scared. I wasn't scared initially, but the questions were really hard, and they made me feel like I didn't know anything at all. And he got to the end of the interview, and he said, he said, I'm going to offer you the place. He goes, but I really want you to consider whether you're going to take it. So I did for about 3 days. And I thought, if I carry on working on the dairy farm for another year, where am I going to get? I said, I'm not moving on fast enough, and I've not got any direction. It's going to get harder because it's going to get into winter. And I thought, I'll try it. What can I, apart from a lot of money, what can I lose? It sounds good. It sounds interesting. So I ended up taking the place, and I never looked back. Harper's been fantastic for me. It really suited me. It was, one of the best things that has ever happened to me, for sure. And so I did start on ag with animal science. I probably got about, maybe it was 6 weeks in, perhaps, and I thought, yeah, okay, so the animal science stuff isn't for me anymore. I'm interested in the machinery side of it. I didn't know you could study it. I didn't know how much there was involved in it. I didn't know about any of the engineering stuff. And I thought, this is really interesting. I really like this. It's kind of, I want to pick up more of this. I want to learn more about this. And if I did ag with animal science, that exposure to that side of it was limited, as with crops. And I enjoyed crops more than I thought I was going to too. So after, probably a term, I transferred over to straight agriculture, and then so from there I did my agriculture degree, and that's kind of how I suppose that's my background in a very long way around it.
And yet you are you're a member of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers. Talk us through, because this is clearly not a classic route into agricultural engineering, as it were.
Yep, not at all.
Talk us through your thought process. And I mean, that it maybe fits with some of the things you did on placement immediately following up. I'm not sure, but just take us through that. The sort of paranoia of I'm not an agricultural engineer, and yet you very clearly, are on the road, shall we say? Talk us through your thought process, and talk us through some of the things you did to help you with your decisions.
So when I was in first year and we were coming up to summer jobs, everyone said, are you going to do a harvest? And I thought, nope, I'm not going to sit on a tractor for another 18 hours a day. I've been there, I've done that. I don't want to do it anymore. I feel like I've done it. I want to learn. I want to have the opportunity to pick up more. And I felt like if I was doing something different every day, then at least I'd gain more knowledge over the course of the summer. So I was looking around for jobs that was like relevant, but not harvest jobs, basically, was what I was looking for. Ended up finding a parts job in a dealership in Essex. It's a one depot big dealership that sells DeWitt's, Polaris, Merlot, and I did parts, and I absolutely loved it. Like from the first day, I really enjoyed it. I loved the responsibility I got. I loved looking through the parts manuals. I loved ordering the part and it being right. I really enjoyed that. And I love learning more about the machines, how they work, the components of the machine, how they all link up, all that sort of stuff I thought was fascinating. And then kind of after that, somewhere in parts, I thought dealership life is the one for me. I really like dealerships. I really like machinery. That's where I want to be when I'm graduated. And so when it came to placement year, I was thinking, what do I want to do that's going to get me on the right track? Always motivated by the future. I'm always aware of what my decisions are going to lead me to. And I thought I wanted to work in a dealership, but I thought the way to do this is to get more experience, build it up. I don't just want to do parts because I've done parts or parts of parts. I've done a section of parts, but I wanted to expand it and get further and build it. So I knew kind of where I wanted to be afterwards. So I thought I'll try. I applied for a few different manufacturers, John Deere being one of them. And that was a sales and marketing role, really. It was shows and events, I think was my title. And so I got that job and did that for a year. And there was just so much more than I'd expected. It was a COVID year, so I managed to get involved in quite a lot more than the placement students usually do. So I got to see kind of different elements of how everything was incorporated, and I got to work in departments that I probably wouldn't have done in any other years. So I got to learn more about the warranty side, learn more about the sales side, and just have a better overview than I thought I was going to get, I think, is what I ended up with. And so from then I knew that I was almost going to stay with John Deere. So that helped me with one decision. And then when I got back into uni, I was interested in machines. So I saw I was good friends with a lot of agricultural engineers at Harper, and so when they talked about going to the iAgri events, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll go to that. Or it would be even the car related ones I'd still go to because I was interested in it. I thought, it's something interesting to do. I'm going to build up my knowledge. It'd be something to learn about of an evening. So I went to quite a few of the branch meetings, and I slid on the sly. I don't think they minded me being there, but everyone else signed their names, and I went through and. So then when it got to final year and I was doing my dissertation, I thought, well, I'm using quite a lot of the resources that would be from iAgri, and I'm talking to quite a lot of the people that would be involved in iAgri. So I thought, why don't I just try and join? So I sent an email and I said, would you be interested in having an agricultural scientist? I'm not an engineer, but I'm a scientist and I have an interest in precision ag. I've got an interest in machinery. And they said, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into iAgri, but it was always on the pretense of, but I'm not an agricultural engineer, but my interest is in technology, but it's not, that's not my degree. So I felt lucky when I got a place, really.
Yeah, but I would come straight back to you and say, but you are an agricultural engineer, irrespective of qualification, because you look at the work you do, you look at the job you do, and that seamlessly leads us into, tell us a bit more about your journey. Tell us what you're doing now, and after leaving Harper, your journey to get to where you are now.
Okay, so I started when I left Harper. My dissertation was in precision ag, and that was kind of where my interest was. And I'd taken a step back from, I suppose, the dealership route and ended up working for Soil, the precision agriculture company owned by Frontier. And I was writing application or fertilizer plans. I was working on the applications team, and it was interesting. I enjoyed learning about it. I enjoyed incorporating the science and the technology together and building a product that was useful. But it wasn't for me. And so I'd spent about 3 months there. And then it wasn't practical, I suppose, enough. It wasn't farmer facing enough. Water.
Yeah, looking for a little bit more application, shall we say?
Yes, looking for more application, more involvement, a bit more hands-on is what I was looking for. And I saw a job come up at a dealership and I thought, perfect. It was so it's working with Ben Burgess, and we had quite a few discussions before I started about what,
just for the benefit of the listeners, Ben Burgess is East Anglia's number one only John Deere dealer. Multi-branch John Deere dealer.
Yeah, so it is a huge dealership, really big, really good. It was, when I worked at John Deere, it was one of the dealerships that I always fondly remember, just with how the people were that I met from Ben Burgess, and kind of my experience with anyone that came through Langer, basically, that was involved in it. I also like East Anglia, so that was helpful. So I ended up on this, I want to say graduate scheme. The official role is management trainee, but it involves a lot of movement around the dealership. So because I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to be, I wanted a bit of variety, or to know that I could move around, because you can do a job or do a full-time job and move from there. But I thought, if I set the precedent that I want to move, then I won't be stressed when I have to move, or I won't feel like
you're building your experience and you're strengthening and widening your depth of knowledge, aren't you?
Exactly. And Yeah, so I started Ben Burgess in November, and I am my role at the moment is a service advisor. So I proactively organize workshop jobs based on machine alerts, based on telematics data, and based on service intervals. So I process information coming from the machines to work out what the problem is, how to solve the problem, and how I can get someone out to the problem as quickly as possible.
So from where you are now with Ben Burgess, working your way around various departments and doing various things, where do you see your career going? Or alternatively, you've told us a bit about what you're into, but what would you like to explore further? Or what's the next step? Where do you see yourself?
I think the next steps for me are fairly small steps, just in terms of developing my experience in the sector, developing my knowledge of machinery. But long term, I'm probably looking at going more into the precision ag side. One of the reasons that I chose to work with a John Deere dealership is that I personally think that John Deere is very progressive with their technology route, and so I think that long term is kind of the goal for me to get into, and kind of looking at the precision ag side of it, the data side of it is where my predominant interests are. It's the data, but also people's how people interact with the data that they're getting from the machines, because as I've done my degree, I've worked out that you can collect every single bit of data on what you're doing in agriculture, but do you have the management system to process it, and do you know what you're going to do with the data after it? I feel like a big question in agriculture is, why have you collected that? What are you going to do with what you've got? So I'd be interested in working in data collection, data processing, data management, all of that I suppose that side of agriculture. I want to make data useful. So if I can work that into a dealership role, or if I can find a role that suits that kind of want to make sure that what we're collecting, how we're processing it, and the output of that data is useful to a farmer here, and not just collecting for the fun of it, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Just a little bit wider as we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the key issues facing? And I'm going to say agricultural engineering, and I appreciate you. So that's in the widest sense. Agricultural technology, agricultural innovation. What are the key issues and challenges facing it, which you see?
So I suppose the wider ones, I'd start with things like getting staff, environmental pressures. I just think that there's in general, the problems that are facing agriculture are also facing agriculture engineers, because at the end of the day,
the two are interlinked. Absolutely.
Those problems, I'd argue, almost offer the option of a solution as well. So it is something that agricultural engineers together can work towards. Things like taking labour as a very vague example, but lettuce pickers, producing lettuce pickers so that you don't have to have the labour to come in and pick the lettuce. I think that's an agricultural solution to a problem that we're facing. And I know that it's long term, and it takes a long time to process those things and produce something that's commercially available, that's viable, that the customer will buy, etc. I know that it's hard work, but it's those issues that are facing agriculture offer solutions or they offer the opportunity to create a solution for agriculture engineers. In terms of my sort of niche, I suppose, or what I know about, or what I've studied in my dissertation, was more that we can find cool things to look at, we can create new products, we can invent new technologies. But the big problem I find with agriculture engineering in general is that, do we have a way to process things? Like, is there a way that we're making these things useful? Are we making products? Are we creating things that are wanted by farmers? Because at the end of the day, if you're producing a product, you need someone to buy it. Are we making products for the right market? Are we getting the information across to farmers of how beneficial the products are? Are we making the products so that they are as beneficial as they could be? You know, are we meeting the demands of what the farmers want, or have the capacity to use, almost having an awareness of who the clients are, I suppose.
Yeah,
I think that's
and as you say, just because technology can doesn't mean it should. So the appropriateness of innovation, rather than because the functionality exists. Functionality may exist, but if it's not appropriate. I was about to do the and finally bit now, but what would you say to somebody who's considering a land-based engineering technical type career? What advice? Because you've been on quite a journey. If you look at your background and the journey you've been on to get to where you are at a relatively young age. I'm not going to ask a lady her age, but I'm guessing that somewhere in your early to mid 20s, shall we say?
I'm not a teenager anymore. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've all had to cope with that loss, I'm afraid. But yeah, what advice would you offer to somebody who isn't quite in the position you're in, thinking, I think I'm interested in this, but.
I think a lot of my decisions were based on the fact that I thought I wasn't enough, or thought I didn't know enough, or thought I needed to understand more to get where I wanted to be. And one of the things that I've learned in my journey between my degree, during my degree, between my degree and getting the job I'm at now, and while I'm at the job, people will hire you for attitude. They will, that it's how you approach things that is the reason that people. I think that when you do a land-based engineering when you go down that avenue of land-based engineering, you're expected to be. I'd expect one to be practical, like not even outdoorsy, but able to fix things. That's, it's not me. And I kind of thought, can I do parts because I can't fix tractor? Can I work for John Deere because I don't know exactly how an engine works, or, but people, that's not everything. That's not the be all and end all of agricultural engineering. I think for me, once I learnt that there were roles within agricultural engineering that I can do, that's when it became really interesting to me. And I think that once we understand that it's bigger than what it looks like from the outside, that's when the opportunities arise for people like me, because I can come in and I can do helpful stuff, and I can be part of the team, even if I don't have a degree in engineering, even if I'm not engineering minded. It's kind of I bring something else to the table, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what I tell anyone in my position, or anyone who's even considering agriculture from non-agricultural background, is kind of, you bring something else. It's having that knowledge that you have something to offer that might not be considered by other people, or you can think different way, or you can bring something else to the table. You can bring a different perspective, and people learn loads of different things in different avenues of life. So whatever you've learned in your background, it will come in handy at some stage. Yeah. So I think that's
something to bring to bear.
Yeah, and it's not. I think my advice would be don't worry about what people think, because people, they want at the end of the day, anyone hiring you wants you to do well. So they're going to train you up to how they want you, and they're going to make sure that you're at a level that's good for them and good for you as well. So I think that don't be afraid to jump in with 2 feet if you're offered anything at all. It's it's a testament to you and the company for having you, I suppose.
Absolutely, it's a compliment as well, isn't it? Can you recommend any podcasts or YouTube channels or anything you use to get a bit of encouragement and to help you on your way?
So I'm not a big YouTube user. I do listen to Farmers Weekly podcasts, and I listen to Farming Today as and when I have the time, which I always find useful to have kind of background knowledge of agriculture in general and understand kind of the market. But YouTube videos, I watch the branch meetings, the ones that are done at Harper. They're recorded online, so I've watched quite a few of those back, given that I'm now in the east of the country, not the west. So I try and keep it up to date with those. But the things that I find more useful almost than those talks is going to events. I love going to any event, whether it's Crop Tech, Llama, or just things like the AGM that I went to at class that I Agri did. It's me being able to talk to people, and I think that I gain a lot from having discussions with people within my interest, but also their interests. So kind of finding out what they do and finding out how they work, and taking life advice from people around. And I find that that's more useful to me than would be listening to a video or listening to a podcast quite a lot of the time, just because I'm able to pick up on different things and learn quite a lot about a small thing, as opposed to, I suppose, watching a video that might cover quite a lot in a short space of time. I enjoy interacting with people, I suppose. So I do like going to events as opposed to watching things online.
It's always great to be with people. And I think we've all learned a lot through COVID that whilst Zoom and Teams are things, there is no substitute for face-to-face, is there? Absolutely. I quite agree. Well, look, Maisie, I think on that point, maybe we'll wrap up. Thank you very much for a most positive, encouraging and uplifting 30 minutes and talking to us about your journey, and recognizing that you're not the finished article, and that that there's a way to go, and that you've got a plan. I've really enjoyed spending some time with you and listening to this. So on behalf of myself and the Institution of Agricultural Engineers, Maisie Wildgoose, thank you for taking part in the Landwards podcast. Thank you, Maisie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For more information, visit www.iagri.org. You have been listening to Landwards, the podcast for the land-based engineering community, brought to you by the Institution of Agricultural Engineers.